The opening scene features an app developer George Addo, who wakes up next to his fiancée Sarah on July 1st. It's a big day for George as he's presenting his revolutionary new app, Hazard Lights, to a bank for a loan. As he gets ready for the same, the news shows a potentially deadly viral outbreak in the entire nation. On his way to the bank, he bumps into a random stranger but doesn't pay much attention to it. Despite his nervousness, George manages to get the loan approved, which means that he can now snag a patent for his app. That evening, he takes Sarah out for dinner to celebrate this joyous occasion. Upon returning back home, she reveals another big news that she's pregnant, adding more happiness to George's life. As time fast forwards, the two of them happily marry each other. However, these happy moments are overshadowed by a deadly virus called MERS-22 that seems to be spreading throughout the country, taking countless innocent lives. As a result of this, we see people start wearing face masks, adopting extreme precautions. The hospital is full of patients, each coughing uncontrollably. As a few months pass by, George and Sarah also begin to cough, showing some symptoms of the virus. At one point of time, George suddenly wakes up back on July 1st, his presentation day. This leaves him perplexed, and he wonders that he has already gone through this day. The whole sequence of events plays out just like before, including a guy bumping into him out in the street. Next, he goes for the presentation, but he fumbles his loan meeting due to his current confusing state. Later at home, he tries to explain to his wife about how he's reliving all of these moments. However, she doesn't understand anything and instead believes that something is wrong with him. In order to confirm his suspicion, George asks her to take a pregnancy test, but she refuses, saying that it's not the right time to have a child. In the later days, George learns about the spreading MERS-22, so he goes full-on survivalist mode, donning a hazmat suit and gathering supplies. Seeing his strange actions, Sarah becomes so upset that she decides to stay with her family for a while. As she walks away, George follows her outside in an attempt to stop her, but she leaves, suggesting that he see a therapist. Just then, George is approached by a woman named Archie, who claims to have all the answers he's seeking for. She then hands him a card with an address, asking him to meet her if he experiences such a time jump again. Just as Archie said, the time jumps back, and George once again wakes up on 1st July. Finding his wife beside him fills him with joy, leading him to express his happiness through a kiss. In the aftermath, George heads straight to the said address, where he meets Archie. She finally discloses that he is a mutant who possesses a special ability to jump through times. As they converse, Archie introduces herself as a member of the Lazarus Project, or TLP, a top-secret multinational organization that is dedicated to preventing and undoing mass extinction events via diplomatic, scientific, or militaristic means. According to her, they have prevented the end of the world in multiple timelines through time travel. She also explains that they can only jump back to the 1st of July as this serves as a sort of checkpoint. Turns out that humans are regularly exposed to time jumps but are unable to recognize them. George is one of the very few who can. Following this, Archie takes George to TLP headquarters, where she introduces him to the team members Wes, Greta, Dane, Blake, and another mutant named Shiv. The gang encourages George to join them in their mission to save the world. He initially struggles to grasp all of these revelations at once, but eventually agrees to work for them. However, he keeps all of this hidden from his wife and pretends that he's still working as an app developer. The next scene features a montage of George undergoing professional training at the Lazarus headquarters. He partakes in sharpshooting practice and researching on potential extinction-level events. One day after work, George returns home when his wife asks him to accompany her to a dinner party hosted by one of her colleagues, Carl. George doesn't seem to like Carl much because he always boasts about his wealth and also tries to flirt with Sarah. Despite this, he reluctantly agrees and heads to Carl's place. While dining, Carl asks George for some financial advice. Recognizing this to be a great opportunity to teach him a lesson, George deliberately suggests that he invest in a company whose stock price is actually about to plummet. The following day, George drops Sarah to school where she works as a teacher. Once there, she is approached by Carl, who pulls her aside and demands to speak with George. He claims that her husband purposely made him invest in a sinking ship of a company, resulting in a huge loss. When Sarah insists that they talk about it later, Carl pushes her away. As a result, she is almost hit by a garbage truck, but George saves her in the nick of time. Enraged, he then decides to confront Carl, but Sarah tells him not to create a scene here. Later at work, the group leader Wes briefs the team about the latest big threat, a nuclear warhead that has been sold on the black market under the name of Big Boy. Wes asserts that the threat stems from a former member, Dennis Rebrov, whose name is now on almost every terror watch list. In order to apprehend this man, the project team, including George, immediately boards a plane and flies off to Paris. Upon arriving at a predetermined location, George stays inside the van with Dane, while the rest of the armed crew members storm into an abandoned building where Dennis is suspected to be hiding. Shortly after their entry, Dennis guns down all TLP agents one after another before escaping via motorbike. Seeing this, Dane and George begin chasing him down the streets of Paris until he crashes from his bike. The two agents then step out to apprehend him, but the latter instantly shoots Dane down. George hurriedly takes cover and waits for the local police to arrive on the scene. But before they can capture him, Dennis detonates the nuclear bomb, setting the entire city ablaze. In the next scene, George wakes up on July 1st once again. Shortly after, he receives a call from Archie, who informs him that they'll be repeating the mission. Like before, George walks Sarah to school, but this time, he doesn't notice the approaching garbage truck. This causes a severe accident, leaving him devastated. A short while later, an ambulance arrives and Sarah is rushed to the hospital. After an immediate surgery, she is placed in a ward room, still unconscious. George inquires about her condition, and the doctor explains it's too early to say whether she'll wake up. As he goes to check on his wife, he's suddenly inundated with fragments of memories from the year 2018 when he first met her. The flashback shows George, who was at a party and his friend told him about a beautiful Sarah, urging him to find her. Following this, he started to approach women in the party, but he struggled to find her. After a while, Sarah was dancing to her favorite song when George changed it. As a result of this, she approached him, and the two started their conversation. They seemed to be getting along very well, but unfortunately, the fire alarm blared, forcing everyone out of the building. This commotion caused them to part ways without even exchanging their phone numbers. In the same year in Russia, Archie can be seen on a rooftop with her partner Ross. The two watch as missiles fire overhead that signal the beginning of Third World War. Realizing the threat, they promise to do everything they can to stop the war. They first meet General Kassan to discuss the missile strikes in his country, but he doesn't seem to care much. As a result, TLP decides to take matters into their own hands and continues with their attempts to stop the attacks. Back in the present, TLP dispatches a full squad of armed forces to the same abandoned building in Paris to apprehend Dennis. Since it's a foolproof plan this time, Dennis is captured and brought to TLP headquarters. Later, upon learning about Sarah's tragic accident, Archie visits George at the hospital. George proposes reversing time to prevent her accident, but she declines, stating that Dennis's capture is a crucial part of this timeline. Moreover, she rattles off statistics regarding how babies are born every second and how catastrophic it can be if they start meddling time for personal reasons. The following night, George exits the hospital and stumbles upon Shiv, who asks if he wants to take revenge on Carl for what he did to his wife. In response, George says that he doesn't want to beat Carl, he wants the incident to be undone. Changing the subject matter, the two of them decide to interrogate Dennis, who is currently locked in a cell at TLP's headquarters. They question him about the other thermonuclear devices, but he refuses to know anything about it. He instead criticized the Lazarus Project's action, claiming that they torture people for information. He further asserts that the world should have ended many years ago, but TLP continues to alter the natural occurrences. He finally admits that he's against all of this, because he believes that they can't hold back the inevitable forever. Back in the year 2018, TLP persisted in their efforts to stop the impending World War, repeatedly traveling back in time whenever their attempts failed. As a consequence, George and Sarah's encounter also changed in each timeline. In one specific timeline, Ross and Archie devised a big plan to thwart the war by assassinating General Kassan. Acting on this plan, they tracked the general to a restaurant, and Ross entered inside with a bomb in his hand, while Archie waited outside. Unfortunately, a guard spotted Ross and shot him down, but not before he activated the bomb. Archie was distraught to witness this, but before she could react, the bomb detonated, eliminating everyone inside the restaurant. In the aftermath, Archie called Wes in a crying voice, pleading to turn back the clock to resurrect Ross. In response, Wes offered her sympathies but told her it's not right to do so because the mission was successful. In the present, George gets a call from the hospital, summoning him urgently. Upon arrival, the doctor delivers the heartbreaking news of his wife's death. Overwhelmed with grief, George embraces her body and cries his heart out. He then goes to Dennis and expresses his wish to bring his wife back. The scene shifts to the year 2017, focusing on a TLP agent, Janet. She can be seen in a bathroom stall, taking a pregnancy test. Upon confirming the results, she walks out and silently nods towards Dennis, who is revealed to be the child's father. In the next scene, he takes Janet to the hospital for an ultrasound, from which they discover that they're having a baby boy. One day, Dennis drives Janet to the doctor after she experiences some bleeding. After going through a checkup, the couple is relieved to hear that their baby is completely healthy. Following this, they return back to TLP headquarters and watch Shiv on the monitor, carrying out a mission. Shiv successfully guns down the target, bringing great joy to the team. The scene then fast forwards to 2 weeks before the checkpoint when Janet gives birth to her baby. Afterwards, Shiv comes to visit Dennis at the hospital with the bad news that they took out the wrong target because their antagonist had planted a decoy. Hearing this, Dennis orders him to find the real person and execute him right away so that they won't have to restart time. With hours away from the checkpoint and knowing their second attempt also failed, Janet and Dennis head into TLP's headquarters with their son in tow. They're clearly devastated because restarting time means losing their baby forever. The two plead with Wes not to do so, but the latter is resolute in her decision. Shiv watches tearfully while the couple cradle their baby in despair. Shortly after, Janet wakes up on 1st July, 2017, with no baby, leaving her heartbroken. A few months later, Janet is pregnant with her second child, and in this timeline, they're having a baby girl. She gives birth on July 1st, managing to evade the potential risk of time reset. We then cut to the year 2018 when Archie and Ross board a plane to embark on their fateful mission. What transpires next is a montage featuring Janet and Dennis enduring the pain of repeated pregnancies and births, while Archie and Ross continually fail in their mission. With each clock restart, Janet finds herself pregnant and gives birth again, making her go through this extremely hard process repeatedly. As a result, this takes an emotional and physical toll on her, and we see life slowly drain from her. At one point, Janet becomes so depressed that she deliberately gets in a car accident with her baby on board. Thankfully, they survive due to the checkpoint. The mission finally completes when Ross sacrifices himself in the restaurant. Despite the situation having settled down, Dennis remains unsatisfied with what TLP does. It appears that he has had enough of all the pain that Lazarus is causing. He then barges into Wes' office and demands some answers. When Wes denies revealing any information to him about the time machine, Dennis holds her at gunpoint, arguing against playing God. Wes is still reluctant, so he shoots one of the guards as well as her assistant in rage. But before the situation escalates further, Shiv intervenes, attacking him from behind. He almost has him, but Dennis wrestles him and flees the scene. As he drives away, Dennis calls Janet and tells her that he's going to end everything. Back in the present, George joins Wes and the crew members for a debriefing regarding their next mission. A dangerous organization called the Lost Glory in cahoots with Dennis is planning to obtain the big boy. The crew speculates that the nuclear warhead is in Prague, Czech Republic, so they must head there to detain the group. After the info dump from Wes, George goes to talk to Archie, requesting her to take him along in the mission. However, the latter doesn't believe that he's ready to return to the field after losing his wife recently. Later on, George goes back to see Dennis, who tells him that Big Boy is his opportunity to restart time. Dennis then asks him to go to Barcelona and meet one of his contacts, who will help him. He also instructs him to drop a message on the Lost Glory's YouTube page regarding TLP's intent, keeping them one step ahead. In the aftermath, George travels to Barcelona and eventually arrives at the address. There, he meets Dennis's contact, who is none other than Janet. Upon learning that he's sent by Dennis, she agrees to help him set up a detonator for Big Boy. They then start conversing, sharing everything about their tragic past. The next morning, George wakes up on the couch, only to learn that Janet has already left the apartment. However, she seems to have left a gift, a detonator, and a message that reads, "I hope you get your girl back."